to introducing our honorary chair for the convention, Medea Benjamin. Many of you probably know Medea, some very well. But for those who don't, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why we chose Medea to take on this role at this convention. Medea is a long time peace activist. She spent the last 30 years working on issues of peace, global justice, and broader social justice movements around the world. Most recently, she's the author of Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control, and she's traveled throughout the world for places as varied as Egypt, Palestine, Yemen, Turkey, Bahrain, Wisconsin, to promote peace and democracy whenever the need arises. And for that, we're all very grateful for her leadership and for her passion and her vision. And just to give you kind of a sense of, a little more of a sense of why we chose Medea to perform this role tonight, we were contacted by a local news outlet, and they said, well, you know, Medea, she yelled at President Obama. Why did you invite her? And we said, well, that's exactly why we invited her. Because Medea stands up for the right thing no matter who's in charge, who's in power. She's not about party. She's about the issues. She's about peace and justice no matter what's going on in the White House. And that's something that's truly remarkable. We also chose Medea because, as I mentioned earlier, she does go where the people who are doing this work are most in need of guidance and assistance, and she does so tirelessly. And I just kind of want to wrap up by sharing one more anecdote about Wisconsin. In 2011, folks might remember we had something called the Wisconsin Uprising. I still think it's still going on, and many of you probably agree with me. And it started in 2011. There were mass protests like we hadn't seen. Some say since the 60s, some say since the 1920s, some say since the 1840s. But regardless of your opinion on where it stands in history, it was a truly remarkable event, certainly one of the most remarkable events in my lifetime. And out of that uprising came, I think, a renewed sense of urgency in the democracy movement, not only here in Wisconsin, but around the country and around the world. I think many of us probably remember the amazing photos of folks in Tahrir Square in Egypt with signs that said, "I stand with Wisconsin," because they were paying attention and they connected the dots. And then, of course, after us, there was the Occupy movement, sparked in New York, which spread worldwide, and I think many of those protests continue to be felt today in the uprisings going on in Brazil, in Turkey, and of course continuing throughout the U.S. And so amidst all of this activity in 2011, Medea was there. Medea was in Egypt, and Medea was in Yemen, protesting the U.S. policy of drone warfare, and Medea was in Wisconsin. She came here when we were sleeping in the Capitol, staying up all night trying to figure out what to do. How are we going to operate in this new era of mass mobilization? How are we going to capitalize on it and ensure that all voices were heard in this struggle? To ensure that what we were doing would not only fight back the terrible things going on, but would really cement concrete changes. And Medea was there, and I'll never forget a meeting. I don't even know actually if she remembers this, because she was doing so much, but it was at a friend of mine's apartment, a tiny student efficiency on State Street. And it was right by the Capitol, and we were up there, and there was like 20 people, maybe not even 20, it was like 10 to 15 people crammed in this apartment. And we're all sitting around sharing our stories and what we should do and trying to figure it out. And Medea was there to share her knowledge and her expertise and her guidance. And it's something that I will never forget, and I really thank Medea for that. And so with that, I want to pass it off to Medea Benjamin. So everyone, let's give a big round of applause.
So who here is from Madison? And who is from Wisconsin? So it's really exciting to be because what you have been doing, the wave that continues, is something that really has inspired us all over the country. And the fact that you continue to be a thorn in Scott Walker's side that's just wonderful. And one of the ways you do it is by singing. That's really, really wonderful. Now, if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, every weekday at noon, there is a sing-along in the Capitol, right? And this has been going on either outside or inside for 700 days. Is that right? More. Wow. And recently, though, it seems that the police have decided that that's not a legal thing to do in the state capitol. And they've been picking people off. I think it depends on if you're on tune or off tune. I was going to say no rhyme or reason, but maybe there is. But it really is remarkable that in this city that's known around the country as being this radical city where people have really taken control and there's this great grassroots democracy, suddenly people are getting arrested for singing. So I think those of us who have come from out of state have to make sure that before we leave the state, we are singing in this Capitol one of the days we're here from 12 to noon. Make sure you're there, bring your loudest voice, and let's sing along with the people of Wisconsin, loud and clear, democracy and freedom to the right to sing. So I've been living in our nation's capital. Raise your hand if anybody here is from DC. Yeah, I see some of you. I think we can agree it's a pretty dysfunctional city, a pretty dysfunctional capital of a pretty dysfunctional country these days. I'm not sure that's something worth clapping for, but it's certainly something worth recognizing. And you look in DC and you think, you know, this is what they call the best democracy in the world? Yeah, or as some of us would say, the best democracy money can buy, which is not a good one. And it is just wild. I mean, I focus a lot on the war and peace issues, and to think where we are 11 years after 9/11, after a failed, horrendous war in Iraq, a failed occupation of Afghanistan, trillions of dollars that have contributed to the devastation of our economy, thousands of our soldiers killed, and countless deaths of people in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now the drone wars, and now, all of a sudden, to some chatter that this Big Brother state has heard, there is an uproar. We have not won anything in 11 years. This tiny group of Al-Qaeda still can send the entire country into a tailspin with 21 embassies closed around the Middle East and North Africa and parts of Asia, with the evacuation of U.S. citizens from the country of Yemen. And some of us, I think, I see Ann Wright in the audience here. Anybody else who was in Yemen with us? Well, Ann, you went to a polling center, didn't you, in Yemen, the day before I got there. And Ann said the polling center had the list of the most important things to the people of Yemen, and among the top 10 things did not even appear the issue of Al-Qaeda. So the people of Yemen are wondering, what is this all about? And now the buzzing of drones that was once in the rural areas, they're hearing now in the nation's capital, in Sana'a. Well, raise your hand if you're a conspiracy theorist. You got a lot of them this crowd. Don't you think it's kind of weird, the timing of all of this? Don't you think it's kind of weird that this has happened just at a time when, thanks to Edward Snowden, the revelations about the NSA spying were starting to get some traction, and we were starting to force our elected officials to pay attention to this, and a vote in Congress that would have clipped the wings of the NSA failed by only 7 votes. And at a time when we're trying to build sympathy for poor Bradley Manning, who is facing his sentencing in the next couple of weeks. And one of the things that I think we can learn from the movement right here in Madison, which was so good and is so good at making the movement joyful, at incorporating song and music and spoken word and art and all those beautiful elements into our movement. So that you have on the one hand the Titanic of the sinking ship that doesn't look so beautiful anymore, and on the other hand you have our lifeboat where people are happy, where people are joyful, where people are creative, where people are inventing, where people are building the future. So let's go forward with this conference with our eyes on the future and with that sense of community, creativity, and love for each other and for the planet. Thank you. My name is Medea Benjamin. I'm with Code Pink. I wrote this book on drone warfare and have been traveling a lot around the country giving long presentations, and I'm not going to do that this morning. In fact, I think because it's a workshop, we assume this is a group that knows a lot about the issue and that we're going to talk about what we can do. And it's really great that Dave, who's coming next, is going to do a presentation on domestic issues, because I think when we talk about how we're going to get more Americans involved in it, it's unfortunate but probably very true that most Americans don't care very much that we are killing poor people of color in countries thousands of miles away. They go with this government line that these are evil people and so they deserve to be killed. But they are more concerned about their privacy rights here at home. And the fact that we're able to tie these two issues together gives us the possibility of having more of a broad reach. I think with the latest scare around Yemen and Al-Qaeda attacks, it is an attempt to tamp down this movement and the excitement that had been building among a lot of us that there was going to be a wake-up call among the American people that your government is indeed Big Brother and we better do something about it. These kinds of periodic things will be happening where our government will be kind of saying, but you know, we need to be Big Brother, we need to surveil the whole world, and we need to surveil you at home. So it is an interesting moment to be having this discussion. In terms of how the drones are being used overseas and what we might expect in the future, it's unclear. On the one hand, you have the powerful drone lobby, the industry, their congressional buddies in the drone caucus, the CIA, the Pentagon, and the war machine that wants to keep using these drones. And there is a big push to continue using them in Afghanistan long after the troops are gone. In fact, if you look at the latest statistics before they were scrubbed from the Pentagon website, it was pretty remarkable to see the tremendous increase in the number of drone strikes between just 2011 and 2012, when it jumped up from 294 to 506. But in the case of Pakistan and Afghanistan, it's been the opposite trend. The number of drone strikes has actually been going down, and I think that is a product of the local people and complaining about it, and our movement building up, and the focus being now on what was a covert program that our government thought and was successful in not talking about for so many years, suddenly having to justify the program and suddenly having to be a little bit more careful about who was being killed. So you see since 2010 the numbers going down just when our movement is starting to build up. But yet, as happens in these kind of things, there are waves, and we're now in a wave where there's been a lot of drone strikes in the last 2 weeks in Yemen. In fact, 5 just in the last 2 weeks. And not only that, for the first time ever in Yemen, there are drones that are buzzing in the capital city. I mean, that's quite remarkable, because usually they're, way off in the hinterlands. This is in the capital. And then there have been more drone strikes in Pakistan in July than had been the case in all the previous months. So it's not clear where the government is going, and I would say it's a reflection of divisions within our government. And we should, when we talk about what we can do, include this in our discussion of where can we take advantage of the divisions within our own government. I think you have people in the State Department who are saying, wait a minute, this isn't making us friends, winning hearts and minds, we gotta stop this and do something else. I think there are people in the military that are saying, the CIA is out of control, why do we have all these drones in the hands of the CIA, they don't know how to use them, they're on a killing spree, we gotta rein them in. Then there are people within the military as well who are saying, this isn't really helping us, we gotta rethink this policy. So we should find some allies in places in government. And then in terms of what is happening within the movement, I think there are supposed to be some things happening in the fall at the UN. There is a study being done by someone named Ben Emerson, the special rapporteur on extrajudicial killings, and his report is supposed to be coming out in the fall. We're a little concerned about how good it's going to be because he never made it to Yemen, and he did say some positive things about John Brennan when John Brennan's hearings were coming up to be confirmed for the head of the CIA, John Brennan, the mastermind of the drone program. And there's tremendous pressure on him and on the UN in general by the US government. But that is supposed to be a study to see has the US committed war crimes with these drones. And there are people that are constitutional lawyers that say that's very much the case, especially the use of what's called double taps when they send in one round of Hellfire missiles and then afterwards send in a second round, and that's killed a lot of rescue workers. In terms of other things going on within our government, I forgot to mention that there had been talk that there would be a ban on what's called signature strikes. Those are separate from the strikes where you're going after an individual, you know their name and you're looking for them. It's the kind of strike where a lot more people are killed because it's just based on suspicious behavior. And there was a hint of that in President Obama's speech that he gave at the National Defense University, but he didn't come right out and say it. And now there are anonymous people in the US administration that said that they are pulling the plug on the signature strikes, and yet the strikes, as I said, in the last 2 weeks have gone up. So we're not sure what's going on in the government, but we do know that there is a lot of dissent on all kinds of levels. And Joe said that on the one hand, there are polls that say a majority of Americans think drone strikes are just fine and dandy when you use them overseas to kill terrorist suspects. That has gone down by 20% in the last year, and that's a significant drop in the polls. So it went from 83% to maybe 62%. And I think that is reflected in the government's rethinking of how we're going to use these drones. On the other hand, you have the tremendous push by the lobby to portray drones as one, yes, they're precise and they kill only the bad guys, but also to try to make the word drone be a positive word. They have realized that we have been successful in making drones kind of the equivalent of sweatshops. Just, something you see and you say, yeah, I don't like that. And we have joined the drone lobby, paid our money, got our dues, and get their propaganda. And they say that they, need to spend lots and lots of money on trying to. First, they said our strategy is to not use the word drone and get people out of the habit of using the word drone. They're unmanned aerial systems. And they even had the nerve, the head of the lobby group, to interrupt Senator Leahy at one of the congressional hearings when he said drones and say, we don't use that word drone, we use, and Leahy said, excuse me, I think we'll use whatever word we want and we're going to call them drones. So after spending a lot of money on the lobby to say, okay, get them not to use the word drone, now they're trying to recover the term drone by putting out all this propaganda about all the positive things that drones can do. They can find your elderly grandfather walking through the woods with Alzheimer's and is completely lost.
And kill him.
And kill him. They didn't say that. They say that the environmental groups are really excited about tracking the whales and getting the whalers and getting the illegal loggers. And frankly, a lot of that is true. And so we do have to recognize there is a whole community out there that is really fascinated by this technology and thinking of all the positive uses there could be of this technology. And so when they had a press conference at the National Press Club to talk about drones, they went on for maybe an hour with all these wonderful uses of drones and never even mentioned that anybody is getting killed with drones, which of course was up to us to stand up and remind the group there that is what is actually driving this whole industry, is the military part of it. So I think the drone industry recognizes that they have to rehabilitate themselves, and we will be seeing a lot more of these wonderful stories of people who have been rescued and whales that have been saved and other kinds of things. On the other hand, we are trying to find more ways to humanize the victims of the drone program. And so one of the things we're trying to do is bring their stories here, trying to bring some of the drone victim families themselves here. It's a hard thing because the US doesn't tend to give out visas for people from Yemen and the tribal areas of Pakistan. So it's going to be a campaign just to do that, and I wanted to pass around the sign-up sheet. If you will sign on, that would be great, because we're going to need people to do things like contact the State Department and say, give a visa to these people. We want to hear what they have to say. There's also at the UN session, we're trying to get some drone victims to be able to go to the UN. There's a couple of new documentaries that will be coming out about drones that we're hoping will actually help to humanize this issue. And then November 16th and 17th in Washington, D.C., we're going to have a drone summit. It's the second one. Anybody here come to the first one? So it was great, right? It was really, really good. And this one's going to be even better. Now we have drone operators, the pilots and the analysts who are going to come, who have left their positions and talk about what it was like to be a remote control pilot.
Dates in November?
November 16th and 17th, Washington, D.C., Georgetown Law School. You can sign up online. And we're also going to have people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and some of the best constitutional lawyers in the country, and all kinds of cultural manifestations of drones, because I think that's where we can also make a lot of headway to get this to young people and to the community at large through song, through getting some of the Hollywood artists to be incorporating drones into some of their work. And there's a lot of really cool things going on about that, including a line of clothing you might have heard of, which is supposed to protect you from being seen by drones. So we will have a fashion show as well. So anyway, look forward to a discussion, and now Dave will talk to us about the domestic use of drones. Thank you. So if we have some really good activists here in the room, you will have a marker on you. So who has a marker?
Try it. No, maybe in this little console over here. Do we have anything over here?
Oh, there it is. This follows us. We're all Oh, very good. Are there any birds in the window?
And Dave said, as an outgrowth of the April Days of Action, we did a whole survey of everybody around the country who participated in that, and then we had a meeting in Philadelphia, which many of us were present, to sort of figure out next steps. Now, one of the things we got back from the survey that we did, first of all, many people said, this is tremendous, the simple act of having a campaign that gets everybody on the same page during a certain period of time really reinforces our sense of community and our sense that we can do this thing. So a lot of thumbs up on that. One of the things that people said was, it's hard to organize, and it's hard to get young people involved. And so when we had this meeting down in Philadelphia, we really addressed that issue. And some of the young people in the room said, okay, a little advice. First of all, shut up for a little bit. Allow us to take some of this leadership. And so I've been taking that very much to heart and thinking about that a lot in recent months. In our Chicago anti-war movement, we've little by little attracted in a number of people from, and we have some universities and colleges right in Chicago, so we can do this. It's hard because we're so used to saying, we've done an anti-war movement, we know how this works. And we're learning now to say, we're going to try to do something. How might you like to see this work? So I just wanted to echo what you said, is that I think that's a really important. What thoughts do people have coming out of this discussion? How do we have a democratic response to this problem?
Voter initiatives.
Want to talk more about what that might look like?
Well, I was involved in a voter initiative in Washington, D.C., which won the election and led to a bill being introduced into Congress to abolish nuclear weapons. Of course, nothing has happened,
Right.
but perhaps if that's only because there haven't been more voter initiatives raising the issue with in other jurisdictions. And I think if you can have multiple voter initiatives on the same issue, then this raises awareness for the politicians that this is something they need to pay attention to. And it's a great way to educate people.
Great. I'm guessing many, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think on that, maybe we should start out on the local, and David could tell us what it was like getting a local initiative passed, and any advice you have, and then we can talk about other levels.
Well, in Charlottesville, and I think 3 other cities now, so 4 that I know of, what we passed was a resolution. This was a vote of 3-2 on a city council of 5. This was not a public vote. I think there are advantages and disadvantages, and in a city where you can't get the city council to pass a resolution or would prefer the other approach, you should try to get them to put on the ballot a public initiative. There's certainly advantages to doing that, even if you've already passed a resolution, as we have. But I think it's important to understand that in most places where there's no drone base locally, there is no organized pro-drone movement. You're not up against anybody. And you have this opportunity that we've heard about, that there's this public revulsion toward drones, and you have this opportunity to bring together the people who hate being spied on, who couldn't care less about killing foreigners, and the people who don't want to kill foreigners, who haven't really gotten interested in the problem of being spied on. And the two come together very well, very smoothly. I mean, a couple times I asked the guy with the NRA hat not to stand right in the middle, but other than that, you know, we brought these, the peace activists learned the dangers of being spied on, and the libertarians learned what drones were being used for abroad and what it would mean for that to be a model that served us here at home. And it actually built a bigger movement. So, you know, if it's useful, go to warisacrime.org and click on topics and click on drones, and you'll see what we passed and how we passed it. And you can watch the videos of the city council meetings where we got there early and dominated the speaking period and asked everybody in the room to stand up who agreed with us, and everybody stood up. And, you know, we gave them a very simple resolution to begin with, and they put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Then we gave them a better one, and then they ended up with passing something in between. But you can go after both the weaponized drones and the surveillance drones, and you can have local measures the locality making commitments and recommendations to the state and to the feds. And it's not that hard. It's very hard for me to grasp why so many cities have been failing on this, except that they've made it overly complicated. They've introduced resolutions that are 12 pages long, and they've gone after claims to own airspace, which the feds claim to own, which is why we passed, you cannot introduce any evidence from drones into court, rather than you cannot have any drones in the sky. But you can certainly pass bans and recommendations on bans at higher levels and commitments not to use weaponized drones of any sort, lethal, non-lethal, weaponized drones. And I think there's no serious movement on the other side. You're not up against anybody. And if we get hundreds of these, it'll make a big difference.
I could just add a quick report on Evanston, Illinois, which has passed a 2-year moratorium on drones. And I think as your example shows, the way you do stuff locally depends on your local situation. And in Evanston, the local leader of the peace activists knew the police chief, and she went to him and said, you don't want a lot of unregulated drones in Evanston, do you? And he said, no, I don't want that. So they went to council and they just got this thing put through very quickly. It's not the end of the story, but it's a good beginning.
Very good.
So let's stick to this topic for a bit. Did you want to talk on this topic of getting things passed locally?
Well, I'm from Oakland, and our county sheriff wants drones, and his rationale is your Alzheimer's grandfather wanders off and can't be found by human beings, and he's out in the outback, and we have to have a drone to find him. Of course, the drones that they're talking about, and kill him, right? The drones they're talking about there has to be a human person within sight of them. So if they can get out, if the drones can get out there, so can the person. And my Alzheimer's mother couldn't have stumbled out of the kitchen, much less into the outback. So, but the people on the other side are one of the uses we didn't mention was criminals and search and rescue. And those are the arguments that our sheriff is making, and we're trying to pass local resolutions. But what we're coming up against is people who want to regulate them, like the ACLU, not ban them. And that's a real problem, because the ACLU sounds reasonable and we sound crazy. No drones, no drones. And they're saying, no, we can regulate them. And we think it's a slippery slope. And I'm speaking now for the Alameda County Against Drones, ACAD.
And I think building off of that, I was just reading my Boston's Metro newspaper, and they just put up a cardboard cop in one of the bike cages that they have at one of the T-stops. And they said everybody knows it's a cardboard cop, but it still makes people not steal bikes. And so this idea of even if you have drones in the sky and they can't be admitted, any evidence can't be admitted, if you look up in the sky and you see a drone, it's gonna still have a chilling effect on what you do.
Cardboard drones.
Cardboard drones.
Yeah. Balloons.
Yeah.
I've got to be the cynic here and challenge some of this, just based on some of the experiences and understandings that I've had. And I thought I heard there were some MTA people here in the crowd. How long has MTA been actively trying to
I think
pass
it's
initiatives?
2 years that they've been working now.
But they were also an offshoot of another group.
Many groups.
Of another group.
Many groups.
Yeah, national committees made up.
The MTA initiatives have been going on.
Move to amend for those who don't know.
3 years, since January 2010.
But the older groups, the initial fear
Hope
would be
will-
10 years,
So it's been a while.
Yeah.
20 years?
Yes.
Is my point.
Yes.
So we've had people for several decades trying to pass initiatives disconnecting money from government to no avail because the system is money in government, creates law, scratches the back of business, so on and so forth. It works for everybody. And their response to that all along has been, it works for that system and the people that control that system. So all along, what the system ends up doing is figuring out ways to backdoor this stuff anyway. In Ohio, where I'm from, we've got anti-fracking initiatives going on. The state of Ohio has figured out how they can essentially stop a municipality, a locality, from passing any law that stops an oil company from drilling into that city's property. So they realized, oh geez, they're gonna pass initiatives that will stop me from getting my precious gas. We'll go to the state and trump them, since the localities get their charter from the state.
So is your point, don't do local initiatives?
Well, no, I guess it seems like that is the answer to much of this, that local initiatives, or regional initiatives, get people worked up and try to build support, but I'm not seeing much success in that over decades. What I'm seeing is success in a system building itself up.
We're in a rare opportunity here where, because the FAA legislation to open up the airspace for drones doesn't come into effect until September of 2015, the drones are being used experimentally with special permits right now. And so we're at a point where we can put a lot of these things in place before the airspace is opened up. And I think that's what gives this particular emphasis real importance right now. I think we're going to end up with regulations, and I actually think regulations are fine, so we have disagreements in the movement about that. But I think that the fact that you're having discussions in dozens of states right now, the local initiatives are great, but it kind of gives the impetus. On the state level, there's more going on than on the local level. That if you go onto the ACLU website, you'll be amazed at all the states that are in the midst of passing resolutions. And these are resolutions, like you were saying, that you need a court warrant, you need probable cause. This is important stuff to get in place before the airspace is opened up. And the fact that 5 states passed these resolutions before the lobby got itself together to really start trying to counter these. And now you're seeing them stuck on the governor's desks, because the governors are getting pressured saying, hey, this is about jobs in your state, what are you doing? So I'm not sure how many we're going to be able to get passed now that they're being countered. But there's lots of discussions, and as I travel around the country, I've been meeting with state legislatures, and they're bringing it up on the state level, and they've got all sorts of strained coalitions that have been built up. But I think this is a case where we are actually having a lot of success before the airspace is opened up.
And I think thinking about the kind of state circumstances that may be unique or unique-ish are really helpful advocacy hooks. I know that the drone industry is currently saying, oh, drones are great for crop dusting farms. You don't even need to send up a pilot to do that anymore. And so Wisconsin, Ohio, other states being big ag states, we need to come up with talking points to address that.
Can I ask you, are you against crop dusting in general, and then you don't want to go with drones, or are you against the drones too?
Fair enough.
Yes.
I think that once we get used to drones being in the sky, it'll be much easier for them to be used by the police, and much easier for them to be used by the surveillance secrecy state. And I think that there is a really huge chilling effect, and that it's no secret that the drone industry, in addition to wanting crop dusters, also wants protest dusters, and also wants surveillance drones. So I think it's a culture war that we're in.
In St. Louis, the police chief and Mayor Slade have been pushing for drones. The police department already has experimental drones. But I don't get local news, and I don't get any local TV channels. I hate it. But I have seen where there's a local group, and basically it's some of the former occupied people that are opposed to this. And we need to, we're trying to connect with them, and I'm having a hard time finding out exactly who it is, but form a coalition.
Yeah.
And really push this issue.
Yes.
Oh, we got Bowen, which was, McDonnell Douglas was headquartered in St. Louis now, but we have a big presence there. So I'm sure the city council, the city aldermen are all on board.
Yeah. That's yeah.
So Mike Ewald with Energy Justice Network. We've been using local ordinances a lot to help stop incinerators and other dirty energy and waste facilities, and kind of starting to map out what's legal at the local level in different states, because it's like a state by state thing in terms of what localities can do on things like air and waste pollution control. And so we've been using that tactic to great effect. And one of the things I'm foreseeing is, as we succeed more in that tactic, we'll have more efforts, like statewide efforts, to ban those localities' abilities to do things. And so kind of like CELDF's been doing with their ordinances that are not designed to hold up in court, but which go after corporations not being able to be people and rights of nature and that sort of thing, building a constituency to then lobby against efforts, state efforts to preempt local ordinances. And my preference, and what I've encouraged folks to do, I know there's a lot of resolution work being done, but to go after things that are actually ordinances that have some weight, even if it's saying our little town's not going to use drones. I like the idea I heard earlier about can't use that evidence in court. Like, find all the things that they have the power to do and start doing them. And then when we get even a resolution passed somewhere, to use the fact that we have a local government on our side to then start passing democracy ordinances. Because to get to the deeper issue of corporations controlling things, those resolutions aren't going to affect state or national legislators banning drones or regulating them unless we can get corporate money out of politics. And I think we can redesign government from the bottom up if we start using creative local ways to get everything from instant runoff voting to a whole panoply of different election reforms done, grassroots style, local first.
So do people understand the difference between resolutions and ordinances? Do you want to explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, a resolution is basically saying we think this. So your local government is saying we don't like drones, but that has no legal weight whatsoever. You can't hang a hat on it other than just say, hey, it's another place that doesn't like them. An ordinance actually has the weight of law. So the issue there is, what do they have the power to do that has the weight of law? And they can't usually say we're going to ban things in airspace. That obviously is not in their jurisdiction. But some of these other ideas that I just started to hear when it came to me sounded like really wonderful ones.
And I guess to add on to that, I'd just say, and clearly you give me a job, put me in a job being in law school to consult and say what the local legislative power is. But just go ahead and pass it. See what the most badass thing you can pass is, and let somebody challenge it in courts. I think that we've got to be pushing the envelope as we go forward.
Can I also just add that the power of convening people together in like town hall meetings to talk about surveillance society or militarization of our police forces. And this is part of that larger issue. And if you look at the example of Seattle, where the police department bought drones, and the people of Seattle demanded a town hall meeting to talk about it, and it was so wild and raucous that the mayor had to apologize to the town and give back the drones. So there is power in that kind of grassroots mobilizing, and I think with the NSA revelations, this can give us more ability to reach out and demand that our elected officials come to town hall meetings and talk about these things.
I just wanted to say there's a sort of a middle ground between resolutions and ordinances. With an ordinance, you can go after anybody's use of drones and create penalties for the use of drones and so forth. But with a resolution, a city or a county can commit itself never to use or own or borrow or test weaponized drones or surveillance drones or any drones, and can make that commitment, which is, has the force of that government until some future city council undoes it, and can be much easier to pass than an ordinance.
So does anybody, we're still talking about the local issues right now. I wonder if anybody has any other ideas about local things, what other constituencies we should be reaching out to, groups within the, how do we deal with the FAA's upcoming opening up of the airspace? Any other ideas on that front? Because I think we should then go international.
Yeah, one on the local level is the demonstrations or the dialogue on all the contracts and all the firms and universities that are involved in either the research or the actual production of drones. And it's so widespread that almost any local community has something nearby that they can point out and make people know about it and get talking about it
You want to respond to that?
and doing something about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Many universities around the country have been granted licenses for operation of drones. And when I say many, it's probably 20, 30. But either for experimental purposes or also for campus safety. So it is a very big deal. And I think just broadly thinking about who the players on both teams are. You know, there are universities, there are drone bases like Hancock, there are, or soon to be Hancock. Has Hancock become one yet? Yeah. Hancock. And then thinking about people that we can reach out to on our team is also equally important, and I think relates as well to bringing it internationally, and that might be a good segue. But you know, it's in some ways this is like reverse chronological, because first you do genuine non-repellent outreach, then you get people to town hall meetings, and then you have the critical mass to pass local stuff. So who are some of the people that might care about domestic use of drones? Who are some of the people that might care about international use of drones?
Just because we've been looking for other constituencies, in our case, it's not the local police department, it's the sheriff, as I said, and the sheriff is the enemy. We have a terrible sheriff, and he's the enemy of many other groups. Probably the most prominent is the whole foreclosure issue. He's the one who forecloses, and he could choose not to. So we're allying with the housing activists. And as I said, the immigration and Muslim communities, all of the civil liberties communities. And EFF is based in San Francisco, so they're a natural.
And that's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, if people don't know, and they've done a lot of work on this issue. Ann?
Yeah, I have to leave to go over to the EFP thing, so I just want to make one comment. One group to watch out for, though, in your communities are the venture capital people. Because, as we well know, the drone industry is probably the most booming industry they have in the country. In Honolulu, where I live, we just spotted a meeting of the venture capitalists who were going to talk about drones. So, of course, off we went to it, and it is amazing how many levels of our government are enticing groups that have any contact at all with the drone industry or robotics industry. And people are so enthusiastic about it and trying to raise the issues of surveillance and all of the things that we're concerned about is a challenge in that type of group, because they're the ones that are making the money and are the lobbyists. But I can guarantee you, in your cities, there are venture capitalists that are having meetings to figure out how to make sure that they get the city officials and state officials and federal officials on their side.
Well, they're drone expos, and they have their own lobby in Congress.
A huge one next week in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, if I could contribute a thought, because I thought your point about education is very important. I recently was writing something in preparation for a drone gathering we're going to have in Chicago in late September, and we're inviting people from all the Midwest states. And I posed the question, is there drone research going on in our Midwestern universities, our big land grant universities and whatnot? I was staggered to see how easy it was to find it in state after state. It's happening everywhere. And a problem we face is that if you take any one of these projects individually, they do look benign, right? And they look kind of scientific. And we face a problem that we must figure out how to help people see the forest for the trees, that there's a pattern here of development of this technology. And we have to figure out ways to involve many, many more people in this conversation, people who are essentially technologists at heart. And I want to suggest that we have to welcome them into this discourse. If I can ask a question, how many people here know about the 3 laws of robotics?
Know about robotics.
Well, okay. So I was surprised. I was reading P.W. Singer's book called Wired for War, and he pointed out, you know, Isaac Asimov wrote dozens of books about robots in which he put forward the 3 laws of robotics. And anybody who's a geek, a science fiction fan, and this includes many people who are in physics and computer science and engineering, they know all about this stuff. Okay, so here are the 3 laws of robotics. A robot may not harm a human being or indirectly cause a human being to be harmed. Secondly, a robot must follow the instructions of a human being, provided it does not interfere with the first law. Third, a robot must provide for its own self-preservation, provided it does not interfere with the second law or the first law. Now, my point in bringing this out, it's just science fiction, right? On the other hand, there are millions of copies of these books on shelves in high schools and in community libraries across the country. We can engage a much, much larger number of people in this discussion. It's going to get messy, but when we're trying to explain why it is that we have to actually stop and talk about why we object to this research on hurricane studying drones at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, that we can bring this into the discussion. And when we get all these very high-powered technologists, PhDs, physicists, engineers, computer scientists, thinking about these questions with us, that is exactly what our government does not want to have them thinking about.
So I just want to throw in there that I don't know, I've been told by these techie people that the drones are like what cell phones were and chips. If you are against a drone, you are so out of it that in the coming years they're going to be used for all kinds of things in daily life that you cannot imagine right now.
Delivering pizzas.
Delivering pizza, delivering packages. Finding your grandfather. All kinds of commercial uses. In agriculture, it's not just for crop dusting, it's for all kinds of other things, to be surveying how the crops are growing, what's needed, and so I think we're playing a losing battle if we're going to go on the no drones avenue. See, Susan, you look pained. When I go to some of these conventions, I see there's tens of thousands of people going to them, and we are here. So I just don't think that's a route that makes sense for us. I think the route that makes sense is to say regulations, is to say killer drones, is to say how are these drones going to be used. But I'm open to that discussion.
Can we say no weaponized or surveillance drones?
I don't think we can say no weaponized drones.
Why
I
not?
don't think we can say no surveillance drones. I think that weaponized drones, it's like saying we don't want jet bombers, we don't want tanks that shoot, we don't want guns.
It's true, we don't.
All right, so then why drones? Why pick drones? I mean, I say, and you say we don't want war, but why pick on drones?
As you say, they aren't there yet.
Well, they are there. The drones, weaponized drones, are being obviously used.
Our skies in the
With the
United
FAA.
States are.
Oh, in
our
the
community
United
are not
States. I thought
full
we're
of-
talking about, I'm talking about drones in the world.
Well, we're gonna have to ban weaponized drones from the world, just like landmines, just like chemical weapons, but we can't start in our community, in our state,
A
and
drone
say no
is
weaponized
a plane
drones.
that doesn't have a pilot and relates information remotely. You're not gonna
I think-
ban drones.
I think a good
Weaponized.
analogy there would be the robotic equipment that the police already use that we don't have a problem with. They're bomb sniffing devices, they're going into crime scenes using surveillance camera on a little Johnny Five robot with tracks on the bottom. Nobody says a word about it. We look at that and say, hey, this is just them using technology well to get the job done.
The
So-
next step is those self-actuated killer battle robots that can, think for themselves. And the St. Louis Ethical Society is actually sponsoring financially one of the magnet high schools throwing technology. These are former Boeing employees, but these are going to be aware robots that are going to be calling the shots as to who to kill.
Now, there is a very robust campaign against that, against the autonomous killer robots. And that campaign has been launched in April in London. It's an international campaign. It's got a lot of momentum going among European governments that are saying that they will not use those. They're not in the production stage yet. And you have the big groups like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch that are on that campaign. It's being brought up in New York when the UN comes into session. So that is a campaign you might want to look into, and it's called Stop Killer Robots.
I've got some videos anybody wants. There are 3 and 4 episodes of Alternate Focus, and they're all on drones.
Haven't we all seen 2001?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that for just a moment. The United Nations Human Rights Council, which you may know about, had a meeting just a few weeks ago on these automated killer drones, and with no human intervention except in the beginning, pre-programming them to kill whatever looks suspicious. And Ban Ki-moon got involved, and the whole thing was aimed at a ban treaty on these things, and that this was just going beyond. And that, so the UN is maybe the most likely place, well, that's where we get a ban. And the other thing I'd like to say about it is that we've got to reach our own peace movement. I'm with Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and we've been closely allied with the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space, and the whole militarization of space, which the U.S. has led and is on top of. And we start to talk about it with other organizations in the peace movement, and people's eyes just glaze over. They don't want to think about it. It's too much. Well, this is part of it, and the drones are making very real the whole thing, including the robotics movement and the book you referenced. So, and I do have these here, which I can pass out, but we need to work on ourselves also, because even our peace movement has become mired. It's too parochial. And the United States.
We're getting more ideas out here, so
Yeah.
we want to.
No more silos.
I was just thinking, like, as far as internationally goes, I think we in America should be the first people, since we're the ones like using drones on an unproliferated basis, or unprecedented basis. We should be the ones calling for an international treaty for the regulation of regulation and uses of drones in warfare and abroad. Sort of like the Geneva Conventions would outline the rules of torture and the rules of warfare in general, and START treaties that limit, that restrict arms proliferations. I think that if there is we hope to regulate drones on the global scale, we have to be the ones to first approach the table and suggest a treaty that calls for those rules.
Well, I would think if you look at past cases, the U.S. is usually the last one to come on, if the one that never comes on. On the other hand, you bring up an important point, and I think there's 2 reasons. One is that the US is now seeing with the own monster that it created and the proliferation out there. And so there is discussion, and even part of what President Obama is saying is, well, now we're going to codify this whole thing so that, you know, we haven't, it hasn't gotten out of hand from us, but, you know, other people will take it to other limits. And the other thing is that there is a brand new person representing us at the United Nations, that's Samantha Powers, and it might be interesting to have a group try to have a meeting with her about this. So I think that's a good idea, and if there's any folks who want to be involved in that. David, don't be so skeptical.
I think it would be entertaining. I don't know if
Okay,
it'd be productive.
anybody want to be involved in that, raise your hand. All right, so we'll pass something around, get your names. I think that's a great idea.
Medea and Dave, I wonder, we have about 5 minutes left, and I would like to ask people, since a lot of what we've talked about today is how can we broaden the number of people who are involved in this conversation and get outside of our own self. Did anybody here today think of a group in their own area that they plan to reach out to or to draw into this discussion that they would not have before? So could we, shout out some of those things? Yes.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to answer just a little bit differently by proposing the argument that I would use for us to win this war. Because if we don't win the war, what good is going to war against the drones? And I think the argument becomes by recognizing those instances where the use of this technology would be appropriate. And to not say that it will always be a slippery slope. We can get together and collectively determine, and we should be able to, where we really do have the slippery slope and where we have to stop. If there's a bank robber and we know he's heading off, rather than a high-speed police chase, maybe a drone is appropriate. Maybe there is a situation for finding a lost child. I don't know. In war, and this is going to be a tough one, I think, for everybody to hear, to swallow, but it will sell. If there is a declared war, we don't have declared war in Yemen, the last time I checked. If we had a declared war, if there was another Nazi Germany, rather than firebombing Dresden or dropping an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, possibly the use of drones would be a more humane, I say more humane because there's still some inhumanity in drones, to accomplish the winning of a war against an acknowledged evil. And I think this is where we can make an argument internationally. We have not come to a collective agreement that there should be this war in Yemen. I think there was a collective agreement that we wanted to go after Osama bin Laden and whoever it was that blew down our buildings in New York. Let's be realistic, please. Somebody blew down a building and we wanted to go after somebody. You're not going to get the American public to say, no, we're not going to allow a drone if you find Osama bin Laden. We can take that position, we will not win the war against the drones. If we take the position that under very narrow circumstances with collective agreement, and that needs to be defined, what's collective agreement, that we will allow use of drones, I think we can get the great mass of American public to say, that's really reasonable. But
that comes with the work. So it's good to have the folks that say, no drones, we hate drones, all kinds of drones, forget it. And then you'll have the Human Rights Watch people, the ACLU people, those people. So that happens naturally. But what's most important is to just build up the momentum so that we're having these conversations at the local level, the state level, the national level, and the international level.
But I think part of it is putting ourselves in the shoes of the others, the techies, the police chief, maybe not jurors, but the police chief who really can see a legitimate, decent use of drones that we all collectively agree on. And to the extent that we say there could be no possible use, I think we will not win this war. Because somebody will always come up with a use that does make sense to the public.
Okay. And thank you. Thank you. And so we have about 2 minutes left. Does anyone have an answer to my question, which is, besides other peaceniks like me, who look like me and sound like me and the same age as me and come from the same town as me, where else should I or you be reaching out to? Who are the other people we can be talking to? Sir?
I
I just, I'm young, I'm 20, so I remember like.
I'll trade with you.
We'll talk later. I just remember growing up and reading the Butter Battle book by Dr. Seuss, and that was, I mean, of course the Cold War was over at that point, but it's still like really outlined, highlighted very clearly to children, and it still does, like what war can do and what it can lead to. And I don't know, it'd be kind of fun, like kind of funny to write a book like about a drone in a way that can outreach to children, so they know what this thing can, what these things can do, and so they know growing up that, well, they don't necessarily have completely like terrible things, like terrible qualities. They can actually maybe help people, but they also can do bad things too.
Yeah, thank you. That's a gutsy suggestion. I've never
children before the government does.
I've never heard anybody say we should be speaking to children before. How about it? I mean, that's awesome. Yeah. Others, sir?
Well, it's kind of a follow-up, because it seems to me this is a really dumb question that any kid would understand. China, Korea, I mean, have they not already figured out how to make these things cheaper? How long is it going to be before drones the size of suitcases could easily be set off, from any garage in any urban area in the United States and used against us? Is this not just so obvious that, it confuses me why this hasn't become part of the conversation, at least in the things I've read here. And that should be just so obvious, even to
That goes back to the
somebody
gun
reading.
argument. Drones don't kill people, people kill people.
For the experts in the room, how close are we to having some drone attacks from foreign nations on our territory?
I would answer that in two parts. First of all, I think AeroVironment, it's one of the big drone companies, they already have something that's called a cube. It can fit in the back of a cop's cruiser and be assembled in minutes and go up. It's about this big. The second thing is, I think that the fear of an unmaterialized risk is what got us in this damn place in the first place. So the more saber rattling we do about the threat from China, the threat from North Korea, the threat from Syria, whoever the hell the current enemy of the day is, the worse off we're going to be, and the more that we actually lose traction. So I think I would really encourage us to not buy in to the saber rattling, because that only gets us to an ugly place with more surveillance and more.
Well, what I mean by that is, if we recognize that that's a perfectly plausible scenario, wouldn't it encourage us to try before something like that materializes?
Yeah, I mean, we're coming to the end. I would encourage you to read my book, because I talk a lot about the proliferation there. But just to say that at one of the very few congressional hearings we've had, when there was a witness that was able to testify about the proliferation, it kind of made the Congress people perk up. So yes, I think it's an argument that we use with, I guess I disagree with you. I think it's a good argument to use, and I use it in the book, so buy it.
I think we're past our time, but thank you very, very much, everyone.
Thank you.